Hello children and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to do your history textbook chapter number 1 introduction what, where, how and when. In this chapter we shall know whatever we can know about the past. Now what do you understand by past? Past means something which no longer exists now. Something which has long by past. It is no longer existing or gone by it, time is past. So we need to know whatever we can about the past. There are several things we can find out about the past. What people ate, the kind of clothes they wore, the houses in which they lived. Why do we need to know these basic things? Because these are the basic things for which a person exists. Food, clothes and shelter. What people ate, the kind of clothes and the houses in which they lived. So if we can find out about all these things, then we will know how we have evolved over the years from the past times. We can find out about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, craft persons, artists, musicians, and scientists. Now let us understand what you mean by hunters. Hunter is a person who hunts wild animals for their food or in sport. Or in sport means like an activity, like a fun activity. But a person who hunts wild animals for his food is actually called a hunter. Now, children, who is a herder? Herder refers to people whose main occupation is the rearing or looking after of animals, basically cattle, through a nomadic lifestyle. What is a nomadic lifestyle? Nomadic lifestyle means people don't stay in one place. They keep on moving from one place to the other. Next, something called farmers. A person who grows crops is called a farmer. Next, rulers. Now, rulers are kings and person who rules or governs. Next, who are merchants, a buyer and seller of goods for profit. He does not do it just for time pass. He does so that he makes some profit. He will sell and buy goods for profit. Next, priests. As you all know, children, a priest is a person who performs religious activities. Next is craftsperson. Craftsperson is a person who is a skilled person. He will make a different kind of crafts. Now, who is an artist? An artist is a person who is skilled at certain arts. Musicians, children, you know, are people who play musical instruments and scientists. Now, if we know about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, craft persons, artists, musicians, and scientists, we will get a very basic idea about how people used to live in the past. Now, we can also find out about the games which children played, the stories they heard, the plays they saw, and the songs they sang. Now, where did people live? It is found that people have lived close to the banks of the Narmada River several thousand years ago. Now, children, the basic thing that a person needs to survive is water, and water is found near rivers. So, people started living near the banks of the river. Now, what do you understand by banks of the river? Banks of the river is the ground which is near the edge of the river. The land which exists near the edge of the river is called as banks of the river. Now, people used to live near the Narmada River, on the banks of the Narmada River. Now, Narmada River is the fifth largest river in India. It is traveling along Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, and Maharashtra. So, they used to live along the banks of this river for several hundred thousand years. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers. Now, what do you understand by skilled? Skilled means some people who had or showed the knowledge or ability or trained to perform a certain activity or task well, they were called skilled people. Skilled gatherers means a person who gathers or collects things from numerous places is called a skilled gatherer. That is, people who gathered the food. They needed food to survive, so they had to be skilled gatherers. They knew about the vast wealth of plants in the surrounding forests and collected roots, fruits, and other forest produce for their food. They also hunted animals. Hunted means they searched and killed animals for their food. Now, the two crops which they grew were wheat and barley. Now, find the Suleiman and Kirthar hills to the northwest. Suleiman and Kirthar hills children are located in Pakistan. Some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley. Wheat means your gehu and barley means your jaw. About 8,000 years ago are located here. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat, and cattle. What is the meaning of rearing children? To breed and raise an animal for use or to sell. Now, look at the Garo hills to the northeast and the Vindhyas in central India. Now, Garo hills are in northeast western Meghalaya. Vindhyas are also called Vindhyachal. It extends from the state of Gujarat to Madhya Pradesh to the Gangas near Varanasi. Now, the Narmada river flows through the Vindhyas. So, we have evidence that people used to live along the banks of the river Narmada. The places where rice was first grown are to the north of the Vindhyas. Now, what do you mean by agriculture, children? Agriculture means the science or the practice of farming is called agriculture. Now, trace the river Indus and its tributaries. Now, what are tributaries, children? They are smaller rivers that flow into a larger river. Now, there is the river Indus. It originates in Tibet and it flows along Jammu and Kashmir. Now, about 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the banks of these rivers. What do you understand by this? About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished means they grew. They were successfully, people lived on the banks of these rivers. Why? Because they got everything near the banks of the river. They got water for their crops, which they could grow. They grew wheat and barley. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of the Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coasts. Now, look at the Ganga and its tributaries. Now, children, Ganga has got three tributaries. One is Sun, Chambal, and Yamuna. What are tributaries, children? They are smaller rivers that flow into a larger river. Now, in ancient times, the area along these rivers to the south of the Ganga. South of the Ganga means south means down. So Ganga, we know whatever that area is, that's called south of the Ganga, and the area along these rivers to the south of the Ganga was known as Magadha, now lying in the state of Bihar. Now its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. Now, throughout people travel from one part of the subcontinent to another. Now, children, let us understand what is a subcontinent. Subcontinent is a large, distinguishable part of a continent. Distinguishable part means you can easily identify that this is a subcontinent. That means a prominent part of a continent. Now, what is a continent? Continent are large, continuous expanses of land all over the world. You know how many continents are there, children? They are Europe, Africa, Asia, North and South America, Australia, and Antarctica. Now, the hills and high mountains, including the Himalayas, deserts, rivers, and seas, made journeys dangerous at times, but never impossible. So, men and women moved in search of livelihood. Livelihood means they had to survive, so they had to search for food and shelter, and also to escape from natural disasters like floods or droughts. Now, children, what is a disaster? Disaster means accidents, and accidents which are caused by nature are floods and droughts. Droughts means a prolonged period of abnormally low rainfall leading to shortage of water. Now, for any person to successfully live at a particular place, we need water. So droughts, what they do, they cause shortage of water. Why? Because rainfall is low. So if it doesn't rain, there will be shortage of water. If there is shortage of water, people cannot live properly in that area. That is why disasters like floods or droughts force the people to escape from these natural disasters. Sometimes men marched in armies, conquering others' lands. Besides, merchants, who are merchants' children, persons who are involved in wholesale trade, especially with foreign countries. Now, we get evidence that we had some trade. Trade means we used to buy and sell from foreign countries. And who were the persons involved in this? They were called merchants. Now they traveled with caravans or ships. Now what are caravans, children? Caravan is a vehicle which is equipped for living in. Equipped means you can live in that vehicle and travel in that vehicle. You will have your bed there, you will have your kitchen there, and it is towed by a car or ships carrying valuable goods from place to place. And religious teachers walked from village to village, town, stopping to offer instruction and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by a spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. All these led to the sharing of ideas between people. Why do people travel nowadays? Now, children, one of the most important reasons is economy. What do you mean by economy? Economy means to grow, to flourish, and they would not grow in the same place. You need to have exchange of ideas and uh, exchange of goods so that you can know what is being done in places where you don't stay. Some new things. So one is economy, and nowadays means of transportation are better than in the past. In the past, people used to travel on foot, but nowadays you have so much of comfort. Like you can travel by bus, train, plane, anything. That is why people travel more nowadays. And nowadays, the main reason people travel is they want to learn new things because they get new ideas about different places, how people stay in different places. That is why people travel nowadays. Now, look at map 1 once more. Hills, mountains, and sea form the natural frontiers of the subcontinent. Now, what are frontiers, children? They are the physical features which stand out as a natural border of a country. What are the physical features? They are the hills, mountains, and seas. What do these do? They form a boundary. They form a border of a country which differentiates one country from the other. Therefore, while it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wanted could and did scale the mountains and cross the seas. Mountains, children, are scaled and seas are crossed. People from across the frontiers also came into the subcontinent and settled here. These movements of people enriched our cultural traditions. Cultural traditions meaning we were enriched with better ways of lifestyle. People have shared new ways of carving stone, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundred of years. Names of the land. Now, two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from the word Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit. Now, children, on your map, you have to trace out where Iran and Greece are. The Iranians and the Greeks who came through the northwest about 2005 years to 500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus called it as the Hindus or the Indus. And the land to the east of the river was called India. So, how did the name come? The origin of the word India comes from the name of the river Indus. In Sanskrit, it is also known as Sindhu. The Iranians and the Greeks who came through the northwest about 2500 years ago, they called the Indus as the Hindus. And in their language, H used to be silent. So therefore, Hindus became Indus. And from Indus, it becomes India. The land to the east of the Indus River was called India. The people who lived in the northwest and also who are mentioned in the Rig Veda about 3500 years ago are known as Bharat. Later, the word Bharat was used for the country. Now, the name Bharata was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in the Rig Veda. The earliest composition in Sanskrit is known as Rig Veda, which dates to about 3500 years ago. Later, it was used for the country. Now, finding out about the past. There are a lot of ways children are finding out about the past. One is to search for and read the books that were written long, long ago. Now, these books are called manuscripts. What do you mean by manu? Because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu, meaning hand. These were usually written on palm leaves or on the specially prepared bark of a tree. Bark of a tree means the trunk. If you slice out a portion of the trunk, that is called as the bark of a tree, which is known as the birch tree, which grows in the Himalayas. So this particular tree, the bark of this particular birch tree was used for making or writing manuscripts. Now this tree used to grow in the Himalayas. Now, these books or manuscripts, they dealt with all kinds of subjects, religious beliefs and practices. They told us about the lives of kings, the medicine and the science which was prevalent then. Now, over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects, some were destroyed, but many have survived because they were preserved in temples and monasteries. Now, those days, children, we didn't have lockers and Godrej almiras and all where you could preserve all these manuscripts. So, some had to be eaten away by insects, or if there was a flood, they were washed away. Now, these books dealt with all kinds of subjects like religious beliefs, like what religion people followed and what practices they did, the lives of the kings, medicine, and science. Besides, there were epics, poems, and plays. Many of these were written in Sanskrit, others were in Prakrit. Languages used by ordinary people those days was called as Prakrit language and Tamil. Now, we can also study inscriptions. Now, what are inscriptions? From where does the word inscription come? It comes from the word inscribe. Inscribe means to write. So, from the word inscribe comes inscriptions. These are writings on relatively hard surfaces. Why hard? Because it is easy to scrape and write. If it is soft, you will not be able to write. So, inscriptions are written on relatively hard surfaces such as stone or metal. Sometimes kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read, and obey them. There are other kinds of inscriptions as well, where men and women, including kings and queens, recorded whatever they did. For example, kings often kept records of victories in battle. Now, can we think of the advantages of writing on a hard surface and what could have been the difficulties? The advantages of writing on a hard surface are that if you write on a hard surface, it will last you for a longer time. They will overcome all chances of destruction from all objects of nature like wind, rain, etc. They will not be wiped out. They will remain like that. Then they are preserved for future generations to know about a rich past and culture, because of which today we know what was being done in those years. We know because they are long lasting. And the insects could not eat such materials as they had destroyed the manuscripts which were written by hand. It was written on the palm leaf, which was eaten up by the insects. But inscriptions are longer lasting. And what could have been the difficulties? See, because it is a hard surface such as a stone or a metal, it is heavy, so you cannot move it from one place to another. And then, moreover, writing on these hard surfaces is very difficult. It needs more hard metal to write on the hard surface. And also, it takes a lot of time to write all this. Now, there were many other things that were made and used in the past. Now, those who study these objects are called archaeologists. They study the remains of buildings made of stone and brick, paintings and sculpture. They also explore and excavate. What is the meaning of excavate? Dig under the surface of the earth. What did they find after the digging? They found tools, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments, and coins. Some of these objects may be made of stone, others of bone, baked clay, or metal. Objects that are made of hard, imperishable substances usually survive for a long time. Now, in the picture, you can see this is a pot from an old city. Now, pots like these were used about 4,700 years ago. Why? To store water or to store some food. On the right is a old silver coin which were used by merchants in use from about 2,500 years ago. In what ways is the coin different from the ones which we use today? You can easily see. that these were all silver coins, but nowadays we don't have so many silver coins which are used in day-to-day existence. Now, archaeologists also look for bones of animals, birds, and fish. Why? Because from this they can find out what people ate in the past. Now, plants remain survive far more rarely. Now, what does this mean? If seeds of grain or pieces of wood have been burnt, they remain alive, but they remain alive in the charred form. What do you mean by charred form? It means in a burnt form. Do you think cloth is found frequently by archaeologists? No, I don't think cloth will be found frequently by archaeologists because they would have been definitely destroyed by insects again. Historians, that is, scholars who study the past. Who are archaeologists' children? Archaeologists are those people who study those objects which were made and used in the past. They are called archaeologists. And who are historians' children? Historians are scholars who study the past. Now, these they often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeology. Now, once all these sources are found, learning about the past becomes an adventure and we reconstruct it bit by bit. Now, we cannot understand everything all at once. It will take us a long time to, you know, put together all the sources from manuscripts, from the inscriptions, and from the what the archaeologists found. All these things together, historians sit down with all these things and then they do their research. Then how was the past? They cannot do it overnight, so they will reconstruct it bit by bit. So historians and archaeologists are like detectives. They have to ask questions: why, how, where, and link things. They have to use all these sources like clues to find out about past. Now, one past of many. Now, did you notice the title of this book, Our Pasts? We have used the word pasts in plural to draw attention to the fact that the past was different for different groups of people. Not everybody was rich. Some were poor, some were rich, some were farmers, some were herders, some were kings, some were queens, some were merchants, and some were craftspersons, and so on. Also, as is true even today, people follow different practices and customs in different parts of the country. For example, today, most people living in the Andaman Islands get their own food by fishing, hunting, and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in cities depend on others for supplies of food. Whom do they depend on? They depend on the farmers who are staying in the villages and supplying them all the basic needs like atta, chawal, and all is done by people living in the villages and they supply all this to people living in the cities. This is modern day. Similarly, in the past, people had different lifestyles. By contrast, most people living in cities depend on others for supplies of food. Differences such as these existed in the past as well. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about kings and the battles they fought because they kept record of their victories. Where did they keep record of their victories? In the inscriptions. Generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing folk, gatherers, farmers, or herders did not keep records of what they did. What was their work? They just had to live for basic needs like their food. So they did not have the time to go and note down, I did this today, I did that today. Whereas kings, because they fought very big battles, they had to note down that this battle was fought with this kingdom, with this king, and whether they won or lost. While archaeology helps us to find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. Now, what do dates mean? If somebody asks you a date, you will probably mention the day, month, and year. 2000 and something, 1900 and something. These years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus Christ, children? He is the founder of Christianity, which is a religion in our country too. So, 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. Christ was born after 2000 years after his birth is means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. Now, all dates before the birth of Christ are counted backwards and usually have the letters BC, before Christ added on. In this book, we will refer to dates going back from the present using 2000 as a starting point. BC stands for before Christ. You will sometimes find AD before dates. This stands for two Latin words Anno Domini, meaning in the year of the Lord, that is Christ. So 2012 can also be written as AD 2012. Sometimes CE is used instead of AD and BCE instead of BC. The letter CE stands for Common Era and BCE for Before Common Era. We use these terms because the Christian era is now used in most countries of the world. In India, we began using this form of dating from about 200 years ago only, and sometimes letter BP meaning before present are used. Now, can you find two dates mentioned on page 3? Which set of letters would you use for them? Now, the two dates are about 4,700 years ago and about 2,500 years ago, which can also be written as about 2687 BC and 485 BC. Now, children, let us do let's recall. Narmada Valley. Where is the Narmada Valley? What happened in the Narmada Valley to refresh your memory? Narmada Valley is the place where hunting and gathering occurred. Next, Magadha. What happened in Magadha? Magadha was the first big kingdom in the past. Next, Garo Hills. Garo Hills were the hills where early agriculture took place. Next, Indus and its tributaries. Indus and its tributaries were where the first cities had developed. Ganga Valley. Ganga Valley had cities about 2500 years ago. Now, children, we come to the end of this chapter. I hope you found the explanation understandable. And in the next video, we will do the question and answers in detail. If you like my video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, children.